Should start. There you go.
Hey guys, welcome back to Within the Cauldron. This is Lessons Told number 3. I'm Nicho, and this is Chris.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing? I hope everybody out there is doing fine. Beautiful day out, even though it is raining here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're going to be talking about quarters still, elementals and the ancient ones. Yeah, we're moving up into our lessons. I decided to keep them, so that a beginner could jump in, then later on they can catch into all these other things that we're doing on the podcast, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, be able to have both feet firmly planted between the other world and this world. Isn't that great? Yeah.
Yeah, give them the foundations so that new people can learn, other people can refresh themselves, and it helps give context to the rest of what we do.
Yeah. I truly believe in giving a person a hand up.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't, how can I say it? They get into books and they expect the mysteries to be completely opened up to them, and they're not. But I can understand why I call these books holy books, because they're not complete. But yet, then again, in the way that I teach, I don't give the mysteries full diligence, as you would say. Even if he was initiated into a coven, I wouldn't give you the full silver spoon on the platter deal, because I believe that a person should, and that's the way it was for me, that the mysteries need to be seeked out and not just given to you. In other words, become part of the magic. Eh? Would you
Mm-hmm.
agree with that?
I agree. That I give people the foundations and the resources to improve or divert in their chosen direction.
Yep.
But that I can hold a lantern up for people, but what's my path may not be somebody else's.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I'm keeping what I'm teaching for everybody to, what would you say, get a grip on what witchcraft is,
Mm-hmm.
and how they choose their path is up to them. What they want to believe and what they don't want to believe. I don't believe that,
Yeah.
what you say is my truth, or my truth is not your truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't expect like Scott Cat or anybody else who's in the path to necessarily believe what I'm saying to them.
Yeah. I want the opposite actually. Is I want people to question why we do things the way that we do, or to question the efficiency of things, and it gets people's gears going. And also the bud files, how's it going?
But yeah, I just want to. Last time we was talking about the elementals,
Mm-hmm.
the primal energies, and what I want people to take away from that class is to be able to reach out and touch that primal energy. Don't sit there and go, you know, held to the element of east, of air, blah blah blah. I want them to connect with it on a personal note. To step within. To me, witchcraft is mostly about spirituality and what you believe in. And when you're dealing with elementals, you have to be able to let your spirit connect with more than just words. Let your emotions step into it. You know, a lot of times we practice our craft and it's just words. And I've seen this time and time again. I've had students who was learning from us. I would sit there and say, "Hey, I want you all to write a ritual." And I've had a few students come back and they would have Teenage Mutant Ninjas to Superman, Batman, Robin, and the Smelly Egg. You know what I'm saying? And to me, that's disrespectful. So whenever you're doing this, do it on a spiritual level, and know that what you are dealing with is very real, very powerful, and it should be given due diligence of respect, because these are the energies that help you live, and we should, stay within that realm
Yep.
and respect, to know that, like tonight's class, I want to get into the ancient ones, but I also want to talk to people about quarter calls, to the elementals. Let the words flow from you with emotion, with love. Perfect love or perfect trust is the law of the circle. Perfect love, perfect trust is very important, because one, you are entering into these quarter calls, these evocations. I would not invoke a quarter of elemental or the ancient ones. I would not invoke them into you. Remember, evoke is outside, invoke, you're drawn within. Respect yourself enough to know that you are dealing with magic. And these entities are, let me rephrase that. These divine entities are very powerful, and they come into you according to you, who you are as an individual. That's why I make it a habit of not practicing magic when I am angry. I will not practice magic within a circle if I am kind of agitated at a member that's within the coven or within the circle, whether it's public or defined to the coven. Perfect love, perfect trust. That is the law of the circle. It always has been, always will be. And we have to understand this. Now, to get back to the calling of the elementals, always try to have a representation, especially when you're beginning. Buy yourself some candles, colored candles if you can. If not, if you can't afford, a fancy candle holder or whatever, get yourself a brick or a flat rock. Get yourself a teacup. What do they call them? Tea candles. So those silver things that are white. White to me has always been a color that I could use at any point within a circle, whether it's on the altar or within the quarters. Light that candle up and ask the element of air to come to you. And keep doing that over and over. And just raise your hand at that quarter. Try to feel the energies. Try to make that connection. And while you are doing that, whatever you say for your quarter call for that element, be respectful. Let it speak to you with harmony and emotion. because usually after you're through doing your elemental, you're going to go right into your quarter call for the ancient ones. So a lot of us, we blend them. And I
Mm.
think that's very, very important to make it emotional. Make that connection, because the more you do it, the more etherical you become, more
Mm.
magical. And I think
Because
that's
I
very
do.
important. It's really important. Visualize the colors, you know, visualize it coming to you. And that's where centering and grounding come in very much into play, because as it is above, so is it below, but so is it in between. And we have to realize that that in between state is what we want. But we want to channel what is above and below, because at that point we become the conduit of the elementals and the ancient ones,
Mm.
which also proceeds into uh, calling the goddess, calling God, that interaction. We have to be able to understand all these things. And a lot of people, they sit there and go, wait a minute, you got way too much going on here. Why make it complicated? Let your spirit, how can I say it? Let your spirit tell you what to do. Keep it simple. It's what they taught me in the army. Keep it simple, but leave out the stupid, because nobody's really stupid.
Mhm.
Just keep it simple. Don't complicate it. Hail to the watchers of the east. Air, fire, water,
Mm.
put that quarter call in there. And it's very simple, just like I just did it there. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be complicated. But we also should realize that the ancient ones, they are many different things. It's just not one. And they're not a watchtower, because a lot of people from Scott Cunningham's writings and from Gerald Gardner and on took it as that the watchtowers themselves were the ancient ones. The watchtowers are where the ancient ones stand.
Mm.
But in more cases or not, they don't actually stand on a watchtower for me. They're actually appearing in front of me.
Yeah, we do
Or,
gates. So
yeah,
there's the like ethereal portal for the different elements and like the representation. So you have the different doors, so to speak.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And also, a lot of people don't. Well, for me, this is just for me. I don't know how you view it. They are from the four royal stars, okay? And they're for a lot of us in witchcraft, we don't realize that they are from the stellar cults of Mesopotamia, which was around 3000 BC. They're also within the four common points to astrology. A lot of people don't realize that you can look up in the sky and see these four cardinal points within our stellar system. Okay. Abraham also in the Old Testament, and I'm not trying to get people all going crazy on me. I'm not preaching Christianity, I'm just making points that Abraham also talked about these four cardinal points within the Old Testament. And they are Formahult, which is aligned with winter solstice, Watcher of the North. We have the star Aberon, vernal equinox, Watcher of the East. Regulus, summer solstice, Watcher of the South. And Ateres, autumn equinox, Watcher of the West. Cardinal points within our own traditions always follows in one way or another these cardinal points, and we don't even realize it. It's amazing to me. But I want people to recognize that you don't have to believe in that, but know that they are real. They are magically there. I call to the ancient ones. What do I see? I feel the presence of angels. Okay. Are they fallen angels? I don't know. But I also feel my ancestors, fairies, and the many different entities that lie behind these cardinal points. And do you have anything to add to this?
No, I agree. And I mean, whether people call like sentient spirits for their quarters or they balance themselves through the elements or the representations upon the altar, like these are all similar processes, and different traditions may do things differently. um some people don't cast circle at all, and I mean it really depends. And I mean that's about it. I mean that it's some people do, some people don't. Other people include it within the ritual, like verbiage itself. Other people, it's like the pregame to the ritual.
Yeah, yeah, it is. But what's really fascinating to me is we we have a tendency to call to the ancient ones and to the elements, and sometimes we don't have no rhyme or rhythm why they are there. But I think that's part of the self discovery. Like for
Mhm.
me, I when I'm doing magic, I use a lot of elemental magic
Yep.
within my candle magic because that's where I excel at. But I also yeah, that would be the right word, accelerate at using thought forms within my magic,
Mhm.
which I do anyway, but I don't need the candles, I don't need the stones. I just visualize it, I manifest it, then I send that energy. But at the same time, I'm also calling upon, a particular part of the circle to the
Mhm.
northeast, south, and west, or a particular elemental
Well,
to
that's
help
kind of
me.
one of the foundations to like elemental magic is that you're picking one of the representatives and working out of that essence to do the ritual depending on what you're doing, and
Yeah,
making that decision on like what's the best basis for this working.
yeah. And I also know that I've had a few students who, how can I say it? They want me to give them everything. I mean, just
Mhm.
like, oh, here's this big ass lesson. You know, um, they want to know it all. And, throughout the years, I find that it's good to initiate a person up to their second degree, but it's best to cut them off at their third degree to send them on their own and have them come back later. And the reason this is because it's time of self discovery,
Mhm.
because you go back and you learn about the elementals, you learn about the ancient ones, you learn about the god and goddess, you learn about magic in general. And a lot of people, they just want you to spill out everything about the elementals, how to use them, which you can, but it's becoming within yourself to magically become adept to it. And
Mhm.
that's why I tell people, let your emotions run fluid and wild. As long as you're not doing baneful magic, do it. Learn about these different things. And I'm not saying that it's wrong doing painful magic, but I'm also not saying that it is right to do painful magic. Let your
If you're
soul be the course on that.
Yeah, if you're throwing baneful magic with no rhyme or reason, ethically maybe concerned, but if it's justified, it can be a great emotional release and very healing.
Yeah,
But there's also plenty of ways through what people consider like benevolent magic that can do just as much.
yeah, yeah. Um, hey, here's a good example of how magic works. When I was living out in Colorado, I really, really wanted a Dodge Charger. Okay, I wanted one so bad. Well, we was doing a ritual on this priestess. A good friend of mine was doing a ritual. Was at a UU church, and I got lucky. I was not presiding. I was participating, so I had a chance to really sit down and start using my thought forms and my will to sit there and actually focus on upon the magic. I wanted this charger. So when I wrote it down on a piece of paper and I threw it into the cauldron to get burned. Well, about 3 days later, guess what? Chris was in a car accident. My good truck, I loved this truck, my Trailblazer, it got totaled. It was smashed. And so I started looking for another vehicle. Guess what I saw? A white Charger, all chromed out,
Mm.
beautiful car. I mean, beautiful. A police, they called it a, let's see, what was it? A police interceptor Charger. And I love that car. But the price was I had to give up something. That's why I tell people when you step into magic, always realize there is a sacrifice to your magic. There's usually a sacrifice.
Oh
Do
yeah,
you
that's one
really?
thing. I absolutely agree. It's one thing that I specifically teach when it's concerning doing spells is that in your wording that you make it very clear what your offerings are and how you want things to come about.
Yeah.
Because the more vague you are, the more the universe goes by any means. And so you really have to kind of like lawyer it, which in some cases, I had a similar one where I did, money was tight. I did an abundance ritual. You know, I I invoked my ancestors. I invoked Freyr, the god of hard work and prosperity. And the following week, my father-in-law showed up at my house with 10 gallons of fresh peaches, 5 pounds of jalapenos, 20 pounds of potatoes, and like I got abundance. I had food. Like we had an abundance of food. That was not my or initial intent is I wanted some additional funds to help us out, but I got food.
Yeah.
It worked, but my intention wasn't clear enough in what I wanted an abundance of.
It's amazing how magic works, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yes, it is. And I want to step back a second, back to the ancient ones. When we are in the circle and we are calling to the ancient ones, do you have to have these secret hand gestures? Because I've seen the Alexandrians, I saw the Gardanians, they all had their little, you know, little, what would I'd call the entrance to the boys' club or the girls' club, where they have their sacred,
It's a
your
part of
hands have to
the
be like this and you have to do this and you're
mm,
but
I've
has to stomp so many times. Do
I
you
view it
really
as kind
need
of
that?
the magic theatrics when you're doing rituals in circle and things like that. That it's sometimes ritual movements are necessary for building energy and things. Um, so like we do a circle walk or to raise energy with chants. Um, but as far as like the people that or the traditions that do hand signs for the corners and things like that, it's it's a lot about the magical theatrics in my mind, where like its purpose is to add to the mystery and like fill a space in a ritual. Like if you're doing a
Yeah.
solitary ritual, I don't need to, you know, I'm invoking the god. I don't need to assume the Y pose. Like
Yeah.
it's not necessary in my mind. Now some people are very physical and very tactile, and they may find those things helpful, but there will hit a point where this becomes like clockwork to you, where it's like, okay, north, south, east, west, call the corners, invoke who you're invoking, start the rest of the ritual.
Yep. Yep. And and for folks who doesn't know no secret handshake things, okay, I want to raise up a book. Oh, here we go. No, no. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
You
Yep.
can see it a little bit. Hereditary witchcraft. It does speak of what we are talking about tonight. And they do have the hand gestures and stuff like that with it that is written within his book. Does it work? Yes. Is it necessary? No. And
It's flavor.
this is why I say this, and I go back to what Raven Gramasi taught me a long time ago. It's about your magical mind.
Mhm.
It's all about how you perceive magic. Like for me, before I even get into ritual circle, I do a ritual bath. I want to cleanse
Yep.
myself. I want to see that, visualize all that darkness that has ebbed into my magical spiritual being. I want it to wash away. That's great. But also, right after that, I put on my ritual robe. I say a prayer while I'm putting on that ritual robe.
Mhm.
I am setting up my mind for calling the elementals, calling the ancient ones, circle creation, all of it. Blessing of the altar, calling the god and goddess. It's all very important.
Well,
And
that's
everything that I
simply.
said is not in order. So if somebody goes to do ritual, make sure you figure out, order. Order is very, very, very important.
Mhm.
Make it like you know the back of your hand.
But
Understand that,
like the pre-ritual and the purification. Excuse me. Um, those help us don the hat, so to speak, for when we're doing ritual, and that brings us to um, not only obtaining our personal balance and like kind of let things go past the ritual, but
Oh,
kind of
please.
clear us to be the vessel for the ritual. And some
Yeah.
people get into that with trance state. Some people get into that through ritual purifications. That um, they're all great avenues to like get you into this like headspace to do the work and like solidify this intent for what you're doing or like gathering together to do.
Yeah. Sit there and, like for me, after I take my ritual bath and all that, I like to have like lavender oil or the lavender herb. I like it burning around me.
Mhm.
A little bit of camphor to chase away all the negative EBGBs. that may linger within your ritual space, you know, sandalwood, frankincense, and myrrh, you know, get your mind going. What trips your trigger for that magical moment? Or
Yeah.
for me, stepping in a circle, hey, how long did this take? About an hour. Man, that was quick.
Mhm.
5 hours later, and you're going, wow, I started at 9. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Wow. What a ritual. Be prepared, know that time is different when you step in between.
Yeah, we're creating liminal space, and
Yeah.
that's the bridge between our world and the spirit world. And I've had the same experience where I've been sitting there in ritual circle, and the next thing I know, you know, I'm starting the ritual, and I look down, and it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and I have to be up in 2 hours, and it's like, oh, oop.
Oh yeah. It's to me it's amazing
Mm.
how
You
time.
don't have to have rituals that long. Like,
No, you don't.
it,
Like a full moon ritual actually should only take 20-30 minutes.
mm,
With experienced practitioners, that's how long it should take. You do your quarter calls,
yep. And like when we're
you
doing,
invoke the goddess. You don't need to invoke the god. It's
mm,
full moon is all about the goddess, and that's the way I like to keep it. It's all about the goddess.
mm,
Call to her, get lunified. Call upon her presence and focus in on that energy. You'll be amazed uh, if you really believe it.
mm-hmm.
You want it, she'll give it. Time
Yeah.
flies. What seems like 10 minutes is 20, 30. Sometimes longer if she has messages to give each individual or
Mm-hmm.
individuals. So,
Now, see, for
prepare
us, when we
yourself.
do public rituals, like obviously, like they're on a time crunch. Um, so we try to script out our rituals to be like, okay, ritual starts at 2. By 3:30, 4 o'clock, rituals over, potluck. We have crafts and activities, and then social, and then tentative wrap up at like 6, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
But like private ritual, like I'm at home. It don't matter. What else am I doing?
Excuse me. Well, anyway, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yep.
Do you center and ground after a full moon ritual?
I center and ground after most rituals.
But do you after a full moon ritual?
Mhm. Full moon or solar, yeah.
I do not. And the reason why is because one, I am masculine, and this is experience speaking to me that I'm a masculine male trying to get lunified. Not crazy, but magically, I want the goddess to stay within me as long as possible because I am male. Most males, when you go out and do a full moon rituals, it only stays 7 to 14 days. Okay. That magic within you. And that's why we're so dependent upon for us to go out and do a solar ritual and get that back into us, that magic back into us,
Mhm.
even if it is from the sun. So for me, I do not, after a full moon ritual, center and ground because I want to keep that moon magic within me. But I also realize that since I am masculine and that I don't always want to go out and do a solar ritual
Mm.
because I'm very drawn to the goddess, always have been, that I will set out some water between 9 to 12,
Mhm.
and then I'll take that water and I will shield it for the next X amount of days so that during the evening, I can sit there and empower myself or my tools, my magical tools,
Yep.
without using my personal energy, and also having what I'd call a don't take this wrong, a spare tire to rely upon throughout the 7 to 14 days afterwards, so that during the next, you know,
Oh, I do the same thing.
amount of days, I
I
have
go lug out and charge and
moon water. To me,
water,
stuff
oil.
like that is very important.
I
And
got lunar crystals. Like, yep.
yeah, and
Go
you
out and
always,
reach.
and for me, I don't want it to touch the light of day. It's
Yep.
always
I let it out for.
protected. It's hidden in the darkness. Don't forget about it. Otherwise, the water will go rancid after a certain amount of time. In other words, algae and creepy crawly things will start growing in it, which is unhealthy to put onto your skin. So,
Yeah, always fix if you're using water you're storing for or like moon water uh, for rituals and you're doing it longer than 3 days. When you're make sure you start with a sterilized jar, boil
yeah,
it, um, and then I add like a quarter cup of either vinegar or rubbing alcohol or high proof liquor to my moon water for shelf stability. Or you can can it. You can just straight can them too. It's all personal preference.
yeah. But I just wanted to know, if you center and ground after a full moon ritual.
I
I
can't
don't,
sleep. The reason I do it is because if I'm that charged with energy, I won't go to sleep after. So I ground and center some of it, but I also intentionally like throw out all of my batteries to go charge. So
yeah,
I'm absorbing enough of it to balance and dedicate with myself, but also backlogging it out of myself so that I can continue to function.
I like the, how can I say it? The
You
high.
like the overcharge? Yeah,
I
I
love
do.
the high. I love feeling that
I
energy,
love the
that
post
power
ritual
just,
feeling.
flowing across me. And it I've done that for years. Um, Magic's really easy for me because I do that kind of stuff. It's just like a summer solstice. I
Mhm,
love doing the summer solstice ritual. I love going outside when it's hot, it's humid. I'm sweating to no end, and we're
mhm,
out there doing that ritual. Glory be to the forest god. He
mhm,
and to the sun god. Without either one, we would not be.
mhm.
So I kind of I love doing rituals like that where
I agree.
you feel those energies moving. I just like ritual. Period.
Mhm.
Uh, Autumn equinox, Samhain.
I
I
love
love,
like
I love
the
doing those rituals.
fall through winter rituals. I I'm not a huge fan of outdoor rituals in the winter, like long outdoor rituals. Um, just because like once I get real cold, I'm cold all day.
Yeah,
But as far as like hearth rituals and things like that, absolutely. But like spring and fall are like my favorites. It's not super hot, it's not super cold, and it's like the transit. Well, I'm a liminal person. I love the liminality, so like the transition phases.
yes, yes. I like those too because I can see the when we celebrate these, and this is why I call it dancing with the gods, is because you get to participate into that role
Hmm.
of being god or goddess. For me, it's always been that because shortly after my first initiation, it was like all these people came out of the woodwork like cockroaches at me. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It was like, teach me. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a first initiate. I'm nobody. I'm still learning. But it was a great avenue because then the goddess provided for me
Hmm.
from going through and doing these rituals, provided me with answers to what ritual is and how to see the change of nature and how you are participating within the ritual and the actual real life of nature changing.
Yep.
And you feel it, you see it, you become it because we are creatures of nature.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid to dance that great dance with them.
Oh yeah, and I
Just,
love the working through the year, and we're working seasonally even, that planning ahead, and we're following the agricultural year and starting things, and in the late winter and moving through spring, and then you know the life in abundance and blessings in the spring, and then watching things come in full bloom in the summer, and then in the fall the leaves start to fall, so we're starting to let things go and clear things, and then
yeah, the great mother sleeps.
hmm
She's going to sleep is what it is, which is
yeah.
great. Time of the dark goddess.
Hmm.
That's the way I see it. Because I always like, people don't realize this, but if they look at the wheel of the year, the way that you line up the elementals, the way that you line up the ancient ones, and the purpose throughout with these three things, you're dancing the dance and you don't even realize it. A lot of people don't realize that they're participating, and their lessons are deep pulled within the mysteries when you start overlapping the the wheel of the year and the elementals along with the
Hmm.
ancient ones within a scope. If you align the day of a clock, you take a clock and you overlap it on top of all of that. That is your pattern for whatever type of magic that you want to use, whether it's down to the hour or the moment.
Hmm.
You can line up your magics to work right.
Oh yeah, ceremonial magic can go crazy. The planetary hours, planetary minutes,
Yeah,
the lining things up on auspicious days. Uh, like as a folk practitioner, I use the Farmer's Almanac, which lists like the good days and the bad days for the year,
yep,
and
yep.
then those, and then like follow the lunar calendar for uh, magic rituals depending on what we're doing, new moon, full moon observances, um, and things like that. And yeah, but I had a roommate who was a ceremonial practitioner, and I kid you not, that man had like a Google Calendar where he was planned out like a year in advance. Like, there's this conjunction that
Yep.
is happening next year, and I'm taking the day off, and I am planning this ritual at this exact time a year and so much in advance. And it's cool,
Yeah,
but I don't often get that deep into my ritual planning. I might plan my Sabbats and stuff for the year, but I do not plan all the way to a like cosmic conjunction. Planetary magic is not my suit.
yeah. I have to agree with Eric here. The Farmer's Almanac
Mhm.
and similar sites are essential. I totally agree with them here.
Oh yeah, calendar sites, um, Farmer's Almanac, the Witch's Almanacs. I love them.
Yeah, yeah. You know, to me, planning a ritual is so important. Like for years and years, me and Chrissy's wrote a lot of public rituals, and maybe we went too far for the how can you say it, the non-initiate, but to us it was letting somebody approach a real ritual that hasn't been dumbed down so far that they can understand.
Hmm.
And maybe I went a little bit against my oaths on a lot of that stuff, but then again, I've inspired a lot of people. You know, this is your goalpost here. You know,
Yep.
bring it. Don't be second best in your rituals. Never never pretend, and don't be one of these people. And I hear this all the, I wouldn't say all the time anymore, but fuck it, it's there. You know, excuse my language, my tone on that. Or, hey, this will work, instead of taking it a step up and writing your rituals properly. In
Hmm.
other words, they wrote something with meaning, but not all of the meaning. It's like for me when I was learning about rituals, there are certain things that w- within our tradition that we have to include into a ritual.
Hmm.
Certain ancient sayings, certain ancient writings that me and Chrissy has been taught that
Yep.
we should include specific things that are pointed out. In other words,
Well, that's
and
like
we
the foundation, or foundationals is you're operating within a tradition, so there's guidelines on how that tradition does certain things.
yeah, but it's my truth. It ain't somebody else's truth. This way it was presented to me. Hey, I want to point out a few things to you, but it's your truth, what you want to believe and what you want to do with this information.
Yeah.
So I took the what this person presented to me as a truth, and it was always presented to me as, "Hey, I'm going to teach you something. It's my truth, but I want you to look at it as a lie and tell me if it's a lie to you."
Hmm.
In other words, don't sit there and read through it and go, "Hey, you're full of bull hockey. I don't believe that this will work." Take it home, test it. One of the greatest things that somebody told me at the beginning of learning all these things that we're talking about is look at everything as a lie and test the hell out of it. And if
Hmm.
it doesn't work, acknowledge it. Acknowledge that this does not have a magical feeling to me. It will not work. I'll never approve upon this saying, or writing, ancient writing. It has to be your truth. It has to speak to your soul. You want it to bring tears to your eyes almost. Yeah. I agree with Eric on that. It's important
Yeah.
about timing and all that.
Yep. And then the harem story in Freemasonry.
Yep. But yeah, to me, these things are important that
Mhm.
we learn golden nuggets. We have our golden nugget moments from the
Mhm.
goddess. You know, for me, when I was first initiated, right after my first initiation, I
Mhm.
wanted an atame. I wanted a real nice one. And I sat there and I was sitting there. I bet it wasn't even 3 hours before something showed up, which was my atame. Some guy walked through came up and just knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I'm selling these fancy knives. Would you like to have one? Would you like to buy one?"
Mhm.
So I was like, and he had two of them. So I picked up two real quick, was smiling ear to ear. Why? Because one, I believed in the magic of the goddess. I manifested it through thought form, and it did show up at my front door. Isn't that crazy how magic works?
Mhm.
It really is. Because I still had that at that I've had it ever since day one, pretty near. magic. Well, anyway, you know, I want to get back to what we was talking about as far as like finding your inner core teachings
Mhm.
and how to find specific writings, which I would reference a person to actually look at some of Raven Grimassi's work
Mhm.
and some of these other people that we have been interviewing, like Mike Nichols. He
Yep.
explains the Wheel of the Year there. Maybe it's not to my tradition, but a lot of the things that he writes in his books is truth. You know, to me, it's truth. Does it work for me? Yes. Um, am I spiritually fulfilled from following these rituals? Yes, because it gives me more to strive to learn. Why is this way? Why is that way?
Mhm.
The tangents that we're going off on, just starting out with elementals and ancient ones and stepping into a little bit of circle work. You know,
Mhm.
I think that it's important to go off on tangents when you're learning. Like,
Oh yeah,
uh,
go down the rabbit hole.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, go down a rabbit hole. Don't, it's like this. Everybody would have to expand that. But what I was talking about earlier, draw out things like this and write, exactly what you're learning and expand upon it throughout your years of learning.
Oh yeah.
Just don't
I
take, just don't take, you know, a teaching that your teacher gives you and it is basic. Well, the whole principle of your teacher teaching you that is if you understand karate, there is degrees of learning. You start out as a white belt, you can end up as a black belt. Well, with magic, there's only 3 initiations, but yet, in between each one of these initiations, many times over,
mm,
you will become a higher belt.
yep.
It is a lifelong learning process
Mm,
because what I have found is goddess and God, they're always changing. Maybe not by name, but the way that they present themselves at the time and period that I am doing my magic,
mm,
my rituals. Because as I have evolved, magically I have become more powerful because I have practiced a lot. I have studied a lot. And what lies within that image that I just showed everybody, whether it's from elemental to the ancient ones, or what lies behind these quarters are many different truths to each individual. Many, many truths. Many revealing truths about ourselves when we look at these 4 quarters. And we should study and persevere throughout the years to become more acquainted with that magical circle.
mhm.
Because to me, most witches talk about magic, but there are very few of us who practice actual magic. And the reason being is it's one thing to be magically smart.
Yeah, the
You
magic
understand,
academics.
but it's a whole different thing when it comes down to actually casting a circle and participating within that magical realm that each one of us is destined to be.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
it's the building of the ritual and the knowledge of correspondences. Who do you call? What do you do for the spell? How do you dispose of it? Like these are the it the difference of understanding the mythos and the folklore and understanding the practice.
yeah, yeah, it's actually being who you say you are.
Mm,
Otherwise, you are a very, what, how can I say it? A person can read a book all day. We can read the
Can you
Bible.
apply it?
We can read the Bible all day, or we can read our Book of Shadows. Comparison. To me, my Christian brothers and sisters, spiritually, some of them are really on the mark, but there are a lot of them who are not. But I can also look at our path and say, you're just like the Christians because you're academic. Go beyond that academic. Why sit there and study all day but not practice your magic? It's like for me,
Mm.
I want to center on ground every day. I want to feel that magic.
Once it's about
I want to practice my magic.
finding ways to incorporate magic in a capacity that is a good balance for you. And I'm not saying that you have to go to every Sabbath or, do every Sabbath at home or that every full moon ritual and things like that. It's okay to be the quote unquote garbage witch. You can forget the full moon or, I work on the Sabbath, so like I can't do anything for it. It doesn't make you less of a witch because you're living as a witch, that
Yeah.
and there's the small acts, devotionals, uh, blessing your coffee, ritual bath, showers, cooking with intention.
Now
There's so many
you're talking
ways.
you're talking Preston witchery. Okay,
Mhm.
Strega,
Yep.
Stregaria, Stregaria. Um, as Raven Gramassi says, the old ways, which is magic through food and
Mhm.
drink. And a lot of people don't realize the kitchen witch has that nomenclature for a reason, which we're all a little part of that kitchen witch, where we
I
go in.
love kitchen witches.
Oh
Like
yeah, oh yeah.
any
Best
anybody
bakers,
who cooks good,
best
first off,
cookers. Yeah.
yes. Like I was a culinary kid. I was a chef for 14 years. Like and I'm a fat kid. Good food, sign me up, period.
Oh yeah. Let your magic flow through these simple things because that's part of
Mhm.
our craft. I remember, sitting there, I couldn't wait to make ritual bread or a ritual
Mhm.
cake or ritual cookies, depending upon the year, or
Oh yeah.
muffins. It was all about that part of magic when I'm saying my prayers and you know, I'm really getting into it.
Oh yeah, I
You
get
know,
so giddy when I bake stuff for sevens.
oh yeah, the candies and stuff like that you can make.
Mhm.
A lot of people
Candies,
don't
the
realize
drinks.
that that's part of your magic. You know,
Mhm.
that, use your herbs and stuff. Okay, that we have more precision in our measurements than did the
Good
ancient
word.
ones. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I truly agree with you on that, Eric. 100%. For me, you have the 3 days of powers: the day before, during, and after a Sabbath. And I feel the same way within, the full moon. You have the day before, and you have the day after, and you have the day during. You know,
See,
same
I
way.
do it differently. For lunar, I follow the 7 day. So the week of the full moon, the energy intensifies leading up to it, and then wanes following.
Yeah, but
But same concept. And
but
then
but it's within our belief systems as
mhm,
individuals, and I can't say, oh no, 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 you're totally wrong. You know, I believe that it's how you
yeah,
believe and
mhm,
how you let the magic of life of the goddess, permeate your
yeah,
spirit and how you move. I've always been steadfast on, through the day before, whether it's a full moon, maiden moon,
mhm,
crone moon, the dark time of the dark goddess, it all evolves for me around having those core centerings because it keeps me sharp. Otherwise,
mhm.
I become a sloppy witch. And I don't like being that sloppy witch. I don't. I don't believe in it. I believe in having things, like for me and us doing this class here and talking about witchcraft. I sat there that whole time from the time we decided to do this to work my magic up till I remember everything. Well, guess what I found out? Chris is getting older. Chris is forgetting, so I had to go back through
Hmm.
and pull some things and go, hey, yeah, I yeah. I have my list, and it's always good to prepare. From the time you start thinking about it, that is when magic starts happening.
Hmm.
That thought, or the gods are pushing you with that thought, their thought, into your brain.
Hmm.
One or
Oh
the
yeah,
other.
that's a really fun one to do. Go somewhere, and if you're working with a specific deity, ask them to guide you or show you a sign that, you know, of something, or, you've done a spell and you want to know how it's going. Ask them, check in and see, be like, okay, can I get a sign if this is going well? And you can be specific. Um, but the notes after that, it's like when I do a ritual, I have my workbook that, here's the ritual, the date, everything, what it was, and then I leave like 2 pages blank behind it. And then it's the 1 month, the 3 month, the 6 month, and it's, what have I seen happening? What are the signs things are working? What would I do differently about this spell? And it's not only helps me make it better and work better in my system, but also I have this logbook of, okay, this is when I did this spell, and then it's really cool to see the verification and the validation in your practice of like tracking your progress and your accomplishments.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
Now,
I can look back on that.
here's something that I have to ask you because of your due diligence. Do you think that you would be on a podcast talking to famous witches, weekly or bi-weekly? Um, would you think that if you wouldn't practice your magic the way that you do, would you be at this point now in your life? Is
Oh,
that
hell
your
no.
magic?
Absolutely
And
not. I think that, the is the Norse pagan way of this thing called the Haminja, which is like the flow of fate. Like when the gods are pleased and the spirits are happy, life moves smoothly and like you will flow into where you need to be. And I really think that that's what's been happening in my life is that, like, if you asked me 10 years ago uh if I would be on a podcast teaching, have gotten degrees, have, met any of these authors or done, written a book or anything, I would have laughed. Like, flat out, I would have laughed. And
I would have
it's
to agree with you. That's still how I feel. It's like,
really
wow.
weird
Yeah.
to think that, like, I I got dropped in, the to make these connections and meet these people and friends and family and get to share these experiences with people is my magic, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah. It's been, how can I say, for me, because I've been working with the public for quite a few years, but it seems like from day one to even right now,
Mhm.
um, having people, approach us to get on the podcast or us approaching them and them
Yeah.
saying yes, magic is manifesting in front of me. It's
Mhm.
like, wow, I get to talk to these this author who wrote this book. And, usually when we ask somebody to come on, they are the shiznicks of shiznicks,
Mhm.
of, of knowledge. It's like for me having the honor of learning from Raven Gramasi to meeting Scott Cat,
Mhm.
how she inspired me with very little nuggets to go on. But I learned enough to, I guess, manifest magic.
Mhm.
I feel magic. I know it ain't just, me feeling it because I'm having people around me going, whoa, did you feel that? You know,
Mhm. I did a house cleansing, and um, it was at my in-laws, and I started in the basement, and I'm cycling this energy and pulling the negativity and the stagnant energy down like in a cyclone into my container. And my sister-in-law calls from upstairs, and she's like, "Why the hell does the house feel like it's spinning?" And I'm laughing. And I was like, "Because I'm cycling the whole energy of the house from the basement."
yeah,
And it was a really cool validation for both of us because she's also a practitioner, but even the members of the house that weren't practitioners noticed the shift.
yeah,
And even it was 6 months later, my father-in-law was like telling me about how like the week following, like things changed. Like he was sleeping better. They his issues were being resolved, and it was, it's fulfilling to when you do things like that, to not only get the verification, but like other people's experience of what's happening too.
yeah, yeah. That is killer, man. You know, it, you know, every once in a while we have to validate to ourselves. For
Yeah.
me, if I'm doing a ritual and I do not feel the energies, it means that I did not center and ground beforehand.
Mm. Or the
Right after
intention's not clear.
casting, right after casting, before quarter calls, you know, you sit there, you seal your circle thrice. Remember that, folks. Seal it 3 times, and then center and ground, and do
Mhm.
your invocations, your evocations to the quarter, your your evocation to the god and goddess, or your invocation, depending how brazen or brave that you are. It's up to you. But if you invoke, hey, buyer beware, okay? Because
Know who you're invoking and what they're capable
I
of.
could, I could tell you from firsthand, from Dionysus, sometimes it's a great time. It's great when it's happening. But I tell you what, you better have plenty of bottles of wine and you better be ready for a wild ride afterwards. Because after
Hmm.
that's done, you know, you may not know how much you have drank. I didn't realize it until somebody said, "Hey, you drank about 4 bottles of wine. Take it easy," you know, afterwards, then you realize afterwards how much you drank and that you are drunk. You have no memory of the invocation, you know.
Hmm.
Well, you may remember the invocation, but you may not remember
Remember the
the
aftermath.
the in betweens,
Hmm.
during the ritual. So buyer beware, Eric, it ended well with Dionysus, but what I'm saying is, you know, you just have to be cautious because when a god takes over your body, you do not know what that god is doing with your body. And it does reflect upon you what the end result, especially during a public ritual, which is where Dionysus got a hold of me. And, I'm not complaining. I was blessed that evening. I was his vessel. And I just let him rule. And he did, for what I understood. But it was a dynamite ritual, and it was how can I say it? Everything was set up just right. We had an old oak to the north, the water to the east, a full moon rising up. It was what we did was a maiden mother and crone ritual, and it was beautiful. It was very beautiful. Dionysus got to flirt with some young girls. It was great. They all manifested, which was really good. My hand's heating up because I'm talking about it, but it was a blessed evening.
Hmm.
And sometimes, if you don't know what you're stepping into or what you are prepared, um, yeah, it seen me in my failed attempts to be Dionysus. It will come. It's one of those things where, like I said, have faith, as I will it, so shall it be. And I believe in those words so strongly, so strongly. Because when you believe in those words, you're telling magic that you will obey me because I believe in you. I believe in the concept of magic. I am magic.
Hmm.
And when you do that, and understand as well, Eric, that when you believe in something so bad, be that little child believing in Santa Claus, and you're looking at the window on a constant level,
Hmm.
waiting to see Santa Claus. And that's the way magic should be with the god and goddess, except this manifests if you believe in it enough. Don't be afraid to say, I want to feel that magic. I want to feel the element of air. I want to feel that. Yes, exactly as I will it, so mote it be.
Hmm.
To
As I will
me,
it, so shall it be. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. I haven't heard that in so long, such a long time. Okay, yeah. Believe it. That's the core principle of a witch or any religion. If you're going to say that you're going to be a Christian, believe that. If you're saying that you're going to be that witch, be that witch. But notice that on both sides, we believe in magic concept on one form or the other.
Hmm.
The witch
Well,
lives in
there's the
constant longevity of magic. The Christian believes in the magic of believing in God. They believe in Christ. And they believe in, some believe in the layings of hands,
mhm,
but not all. But the witch, we're the constant healer. We're the constant ritualer. We're the ones that celebrate. And we pull on the wheel of the year to turn. We have to believe in those concepts. You know, we have to believe in the concept of blessing people with prosperity.
mhm,
It wasn't that long ago when people would rush up to us just to rub our sleeves on our ritual robes for prosperity and good luck. Has that changed? No, not really. People, they can't wait. Most people, when they see me and they interact with me, they're always willing to give me a hug. And I always ask the guys when I'm giving that hug, give them prosperity, give them love,
yeah.
be life defining. And that's
Oh
how
yeah.
I believe in magic.
Sprinkle the blessings on everybody.
Yeah.
Almost everybody.
And that's why I tell a
Sometimes.
lot of people, witches, be Christ-like, because that's what he wished upon us. And
Mhm,
most Christians go, oh, don't do that, don't say that, we're witches. Why not? Why not? We are the Christ, you know, if we really look at it. We're the ones who are the shakers and makers of this world. When a witch quits worshiping the sun and the moon and these Sabbaths, then the earth is going to be no more. you know all is going to be lost. So we reincarnate several times over so that we can be the shakers and movers, the future Christ, the future gods of tomorrow. Because why do we go through all these extremes to transcend? Well, eventually we're going to become stronger than the gods that manifested us, and I believe in that. because we are part of their magic. Their magic. And you notice how I said that. We are also part of that divine light. So while we're learning all of our magic, from day one to like me, I'm 63. I started in my late 20s, something like that, learning about gods and goddesses and magic, even though it wasn't one of these spring platforms of, yeah, I'm going to get into witchcraft really heavy like I am today.
Mhm.
But it's through that practice and that belief, and don't cut yourselves off with that magic. Never deny it. And remember, as I will it, so shall it be.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Believe in that. Believe in that statement because even though it might be somewhat modern statement, it is truth. When we of witches were practicing witchcraft today, we were practicing, I wouldn't say reclamation witchcraft, okay? We were practicing as our ancestors did, except that we have changed. We have modernized our practices because a lot of us are being goddess taught. We're taking what our ancestors, our predecessors, maybe from the 50s to today. We are taking their practices and we are forming it. And a lot of us are using these newer teachings to really transform to the modern day witch.
Oh yeah, and things are changing from when I started practicing to now, and it's been so intriguing to like watch the process and how things change. I might not like all of the changes, but it's been an intriguing process.
Well, it's like when we first started this podcast, we was talking about how witchcraft is changing to be more of a singular practice where witches don't necessarily follow the wheel of the year. They don't really do any kind of rituals, full moon rituals. They just do the
Yep,
magic.
moving to a
Okay?
more the physical craft, the secular witch practices.
Yeah. And I believe that we shouldn't practice our magic that way. I'm not saying don't cast spells. That's part of life for us. We are the magic, we are the spell. But we are evolving as a spiritual creature, as individuals. For me, magic moves a lot easier when I'm by myself, as
Mhm.
versus when I am with a group of people, because that means etherically I have to move the magic. Uh, it seems more labor, okay, to put it to a point. It's not harder, but it's labored because I have to make up the vibrational rate of what some people are not doing.
Mhm.
You know, we practice our magic in ways that is evolving, and I wouldn't necessarily call it reclamation. I believe in what Starhawk, I think is her name, what she wrote in her books, early books about reclamation. At that time, we was, but we have learned so much more because we don't have so many practitioners of the old, what I'd call the old traditions, who are, I can't tell you because my oaths. Okay. The modern witch, because a lot of people have broken their oaths inadvertently, is the way I see it, because I wouldn't intentionally break my oaths. I teach witchcraft, but I give people nuances to the mysteries. And
Mhm.
I encourage them to embrace the magic. And that's why I utter the words, as I will it, so mote it be. That's why I say that all the time to people, is because when you go in believing that you are a witch I think every witch goes to that point of, am I a witch or am I not? Am I really practicing witchcraft or am I crazy? And it's sad when I see people go through that imposter syndrome. Believe in yourself, you know. Yeah, the Vars, yeah. I don't know if they are Alexandrian outcasts, but you know, their books, they have a true sense of the word.
Right.
But I'm talking to people who said that when the Vars wrote their books, they wrote them in a way where they wasn't actually breaking the Alexandrian tradition. In other words, they threw together an outer court system and put it into their books, which most witches do. If you look at Gerald Gardner's writings, Buckland's writings, they are outer court, what I would call outer court. I don't know if they're true sense of their Book of Shadows or Book of Ways, but Eric, yeah, you're pretty much right. If they are, they might be the outcast. But I ain't gonna say, yeah. Hi Kim, how are you?
Yeah, and that kind of brings up the point of most of the books we have are people who were in a tradition and left the tradition and either spilled the secrets or adapted it for outer court. And we see that across the board, like in the early 2000s with hoodoo, and how hoodoo was super popular because people went in and appropriated the tradition and dropped all of this information that they shouldn't have.
Yeah,
And now it's out there.
yeah. Eric, I'll take your word on that since you're Alexandrian. I was going to say yay or nay, one way or the other, because I don't want to deface somebody saying, "Well, yeah, I agree with you on that." But thank you for the input on that. Hello, Kim. How you doing?
I can, and I
But
agree with
yeah,
that, where
it,
there's so many, and it comes a weird line where now that it's out and not like an oral or like initiatory tradition in a sense of like you must be initiated into this to have this information, it kind of changes things. But then there's still the process of going in and doing your initiations
yeah,
and like meeting the qualifications to do things through that.
yeah. To me, and how can I say it? Okay, you take Levecchia, you're born into that tradition.
Hmm.
Okay. There is a female that is chosen within a family who's going to lead the family magically. Okay. Then you have the Iridian tradition of Strega from Raven Gramasi. He speaks of three initiations. But if you look at Levecchia, you are born into it and you are singled out if you have a magical adaptation to it, to magic. Not everybody's chosen within Levecchia.
Hmm.
This is something that's handed down. And within that family structure, you also have to look at that. Everybody practices the Levecchia in one way or another. Their magic spells are handed down to that person who was chosen
Hmm.
by the mother or the chosen one of the clan, you know, and for them, they don't have to go through all these initiations. You're initiated once and you're one and done.
Hmm.
You are who you are until you get to be an elder. Then you're the priestess. But then again, we can look at the priestesses of Nemi. or the Temple of Diana or Artemis. And, I don't know if they had to go through all of those initiations, because I wasn't there.
Mhm.
But I imagine that there was some sort of teaching and learning and initiatory.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, the definitely like there's learning experiences to go through to get to the point and purifications and things. But we see that in a lot of traditions, that whether tradition holds a degree system or not, a lot of traditions have some level of initiatory practice. Whether that's in, an uh, interview with the spirits or, you know, people going through and reaching out and doing self dedications. Like, those are all forms and different traditions. And you get into folkloric witchcraft and you get like certain rituals to like get the attention of spirits. And, but those are all like your introduction to the thing. And whether that's done as like a baby blessing, like through baptismal rituals and things like that, or,
yeah.
you know, coming age rites, things like that. Those are all initiations.
Oh yeah, and I truly believe in that. And it gets me. Like for me, I'm part of an Iridian tradition. Okay, so I said Iridian because I'm an American, and I did learn from Raven Grimassi. He has been a very heavy influence within my life, but yet I'm so eclectic. Okay, a lot of Raven Grimassi's writings are very eclectic. They're very ceremonial. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a an Alexandrian or Gardanian or a Kabbalist. It's all up to you where you stand spiritually within
Exactly. And I
witchcraft.
agree with Eric here that the initiation is the kind of the introduction period
Yeah,
for the spirits. It's not something that like it's a meeting. It's not something that stops people from having a relationship with divine. Now it's weird in certain traditions to like go walk into somebody's house and like start demanding things. Like, you should probably get introduced first, but
I agree with Eric says there.
yeah.
It is about opening yourself up. Like for me, the first dedication, you're promising to try to learn about the goddess.
Mhm.
And, if you can't keep that promise, then you can't be initiated. Okay. Initiation, what is that? Well, for me, it was about crystallizing my flesh, my blood, my mind with with magic. It's all about that infusing of magic, opening myself up to it, you know, is basically what I was doing there. My second initiation was about balance, you know, bring myself to a self reflection of who I am, what I am, how I think. Do I got bad habits to break? Do I got to get rid of all these self doubts within myself? That's what my
Mhm.
second initiation was about. Facing my inner shadows.
Yeah.
My third initiation was about accepting my priesthood and being able to rule with the authority of God upon the face of the earth. You know,
Mhm.
it's becoming about taking steps toward Godship.
Mhm. And Eric's exactly right here, and that
Yeah.
magic may not take you where your initiator intended. Absolutely. And it's always interesting for me the people that like their first tradition or like their introduction into witchcraft that stick with the same tradition. It's fascinating to me because most people have to try on a few hats before they get into a system that they're comfortable with, that they really like, and it's a learning process. I started out as a like energy worker and shamanic practices, and then I moved into uh, modern witchcraft, and then went into a tradition, and then moved out of that into another tradition,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then I dropped those, and now my practice took a full left turn, and I'm a folk practitioner.
Well, for me, when I started practicing witchcraft, I didn't, I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't know what I was getting into.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm saying? Um,
Yep.
there's some things that I hold steadfast and steady on what has to be into what I would say Covenstead rituals versus public rituals, during Sabbaths. There's some things that I want in my rituals when I am doing them,
Uh-huh.
and there's other things that I don't. I try to feel that time of year upon my flesh, my skin. I try to embrace that magic of what I am doing. Um, I believe that as we evolve, we go through initiation throughout our life, even beyond our three initiations, and how we perceive and see things as we grow beyond our third initiation.
Yeah.
And it's to me that's the greatest magical ride that anybody could have is perceiving how much I have changed from what I believed in
Uh-huh.
to the point that I am now.
Oh yeah.
Realization of like, yeah, Raven Gramasi, he did influence me, but so did Lady Shiva, Gerald Gardner, Buckner, the Fars. Some of the people that we have talked to lately, have they influenced my magic and how I perceive magic?
Uh-huh.
Yes. Am I eclectic, even though I come from a traditional background? Yes, I am eclectic. I would be lying if I didn't say I love the ceremonial rain. I love having that, and I love feeling it, and I love participating in it. I just embrace the magic.
Oh yeah.
And I tell people, don't be shy about practicing your magic, your rituals. Do it. And it's like Eric said, truth is eternal.
Uh-huh.
Terms are situational. Practice your magic. Go through these rites of passage and learn from them. Start at the very beginning, understand the elementals, understand the ancient ones, because they have many faces. They wear many hats
Uh-huh.
behind those areas within our rituals, and they should be explored. Just don't take verbatim, hail to the ancient ones of the east, watchtowers of the west. You know, be
Uh-huh.
open, explore. Who are they?
Yeah.
Specifically, nail it.
Well, it's like
Explore
we
your
can hold the
what was
torch. We can
yeah,
hold the torch for people and show you a path, but I can't walk you down that path because your path is going to be personal. Like how you interact with the other side and the spirits and your personal relationships with those spirits will be different than mine, even if we're worshiping the same being. And, you know, it it's kind of the beauty of the path of, you can have people that, in the same tradition who are working with the same deities and their work looks completely different.
yeah, yeah. I noticed that when I was taking one of Raven Gramasi's classes, that my answer was different than other people's, but
Hmm.
other people's answers were different from other people's. It's all in how we perceive truth.
Oh yeah.
You know,
And how our
and
brains work and how we process the spirit world.
yeah, Yeah. It's like tonight when I showed that image, you know, I want people to see it, but where did all those things came from? And they came from Raven Gramasi. But if you've done your research and you go off on your little tangents, which everybody do that. I
Mhm.
mean, go off, go to YouTube, go to many different sources, go to reference, go to older books, newer books, see what somebody's insight has perceived about your questions of what's what.
Yeah,
Just don't take one answer, because when you
because
do
even
that, you become what I'd call a true practitioner. When you take it beyond the books, you become a true practitioner. You become who you say you are. Your words become magic. Our influence, like our conversation right now, is going to influence somebody who maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the next day, but maybe 4 days from now, 30 years from now. We are going to be influenced. People are going to reflect. Then they're going to put the test to the pudding. Like when Eric's commenting over here, people are going to look at him and say, "Yeah, yeah, he's right." Truth is internal. Uh, Initiation is about opening you up. These things are truths. They're my truths. He hit it right on the head. You know, and we should take our truths, whether it's from the elementals, through our initiations, through our circle creation, through learning how to set up an altar, everything. It is about our truths and the way we perceive and how somebody practices magic and how it is influenced, whether it be from authors or from people that we have met that have taught us, traditionally
Mhm.
or non-traditionally. Those are our influences or truths, and those golden nuggets, those eureka moments where you felt like you found $1 million golden nugget. You know, they influence you. They influence your magic and how your spirit perceives that magic, or the god and goddess, or the ancient ones.
Mhm.
We should rejoice in those times. Believe me, I have. It's like when I got my first level from the Cabot witches, very influential. You know, Lori's writings have influenced me, conversations, watching her on YouTube, looking at Raven Gramasi and all these different other authors. Have they influenced me? Yes. Has her writings influenced me? Yes.
Mhm.
So, but then again, don't be a fool. Don't take somebody's word at verbatim, because humans are very crafty. Don't take the words. That's why my teacher always said, anything that I tell you, look at it as a lie. And I want people to do that. Don't read the Bible and take its word for value. Put the
Mhm.
test to the pudding. You know,
Well,
does it
that's
taste good?
why
Does it not?
understanding like a foundation in a tradition, or like historical witchcraft versus like lived experiences and personal gnosis, or verified personal gnosis, that like those aren't any less valid, but the we're each working off of a foundation, and that your experience may be different,
Yeah,
but that's again the endless imagination and the complexity of the human brain drives us to different corners, which is ultimately like one of my favorite things about witchcraft, is that like somebody will phrase something and it just clicks,
yeah,
or you'll those in-depth like late night conversations about how the universe works and everything with coffee are my absolute favorite.
yeah. I just look at it this way. You know, witchcraft is more than just magic. It's also becoming historically, you want to know the history behind
Yep.
your goddesses. Hopefully you're wise enough to research the history of the tradition that you are actually practicing. You know,
Hmm.
how where did this practice come from? It's like for me, okay, Italy influenced, Americanized. I'm I've adapted many different traditions within my craft, but yet I keep it
Hmm.
very back to the traditional sense. You know, do I borrow from the Cabots? Oh heck yeah! Because they help me out a lot.
Yeah,
They help me
that's
find
the
my balance. They help me find my balance my keels so that I could go through life in a more mature way. They
but
took that
those are all
immature
things
away. They
on
helped
your
me.
path that have built you up to who you are now, and that's the like culmination of your experience.
Yes,
You were a Cabot, you did Strega, you've done this and that ultimately shapes who you are in your practice. And that's again, that's the fun part of
yeah,
the
yeah. It really is. And it's been a very magical ride. It's like
Mhm,
I tell people, man, I have met so many famous people in the crowd. And they have all left their little, uh, what would you say,
footprints,
influence,
imprints. Mhm,
footprints on me. It's been a very magical journey for me. Anymore, I could sit there and just feel the magic. I can tell when somebody's a real witch versus when they're not a real witch because my hand will start humming. When I am around a real witch, my vortex, my hand pulsates, and that's my gizmo of, oh, hey, how are you? I
mhm,
want to talk to him more because I realize that we have that connection with the goddess,
mm.
and to me, that's very important. You know, and I would tell everybody, how did I get that way? Well, it's from practicing magic, from starting out, not knowing what I was doing, to learn to do what I needed to learn to to move on, to become more advanced. Did I actually become more advanced? I don't know if I became more advanced, but I definitely hit that black belt. For me, I feel that I hit those black belt moments within doing rituals and
Mm.
practicing my magic. It's like I tell people, become good at magic. And I hear a lot of people say, well, I'm not like you. And I tell them, I don't want you to be me. I want you to be you. I want you to embrace that magic that's already within you and
Mhm.
to experience it and get rid of your self doubt of who you are. And a lot of people will tell me, well, you haven't been through what I've been through. Well, I got news for them. I was beaten almost every chance my mama had. Sometimes I think that she waited for me to get out of line so she had to have a reason to whoop my little behind. Deck, I was bullied a lot when I was growing up, but that's Kilka, and I don't hold no grudges. It made me a stronger person. I went into the National Guard, went overseas, did my bit for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Was it easy camp for me? No. I've had my house burned down around my ears because of ignorance of people getting high. You know, uh, did with all of those things, of life experience of bad things, did it bring me down? Well, yeah, maybe at that moment, that time, yeah. Did I lick my wounds? Hell yeah. But did it actually change who I was? No, because it made me stronger and it made me a better person because I took all those negatives and I made them into positives. How did I do that? By practicing my magic, by doing my prayers, by, doing those daily devotionals every day. You know, spend a few seconds, acknowledge her, you know, live your life, celebrate the Sabbaths, learn about circle casting. All of those things will separate you, become the magic, become your truth, not my truth, not Nicho's truth, but your truth. And that's what's important when you're practicing magic.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't have the luck to, I would say, be like me, have the traditional training, people influencing you. Doesn't matter, you know. Pick up a book, read it, but take what you learn out of these books and just don't read one book. Do a comparison study, very important. But
Oh yeah,
but
and check the
take
bibliographies. Like, if you like what an author has written, go check the bibliography in the book and like procure those. Look at their source materials and find out. Okay, this is their summary. Where did they get their information? And
yeah,
then open that can of worms. That's go down the rabbit hole. Open the can of worms like that.
yeah. And
That's
there's
the
a lot
best
of
part.
these. There's a lot of people that we interview where
Mhm.
they have chat rooms where they talk about their personal practices. These authors,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to look them up and join into their chats,
Mhm.
or chase the rabbit holes. It ain't like it was back in the days. You've heard me say it. Hey, what's this about? And this is me asking a practicing witch who's been initiated. I'm not of their tradition. My high priestess ain't telling me nothing because she wants me to explore the mysteries, to find out through the goddess what is
Mhm.
my answer. And you're asking somebody, they're going, I'm not allowed to talk about that because my oaths of initiation, my promises to the circle, you know, to my tradition. That's respectful. We
Yeah, there's some things that you can't cover, but I can vaguely point, in directions and hope that you get it. But one of the fun things, if you like an author, you have questions about their work, reach
yeah,
out to their websites, or you can reach out and attempt to contact them. There's
yeah,
some authors that are super super friendly about it, and they will answer questions. When I
yeah,
was studying with the Norse kindred, I had questions about some etymology, and we were using a lot of Jason Crawford's research. He's a professor, was a professor out of Colorado. So we emailed him, and we're like, "Hey, we're heathens, and we're working through this material, and we have questions." And you know what? He answered them. He's got a full-time job and was an author, and he took his time out to answer our questions. And but we
that's great
asked.
when they do that, though.
Yeah,
You-
we asked.
Well, anyway, hey, we're coming up on the 2 hour mark, or we have almost past our 2 hour mark. Chrissy's reminding me back there not to, don't make the stream too long. But Nicho, I love you, brother. Thank you for this great
Love you too.
conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
And Eric, thank you. Thank you. Kim, thank you for joining us.
Mhm.
But we better end this. Good. I could talk all night, but
Oh, yeah.
I just want to say I love you, Nicho. Everybody, thank you for joining us, and have a blessed evening and take care.
You as well. Stay blessed, guys.
Blessed be.